Our topic is Eurocentrism and Ethnocentrism. We'll explore how Eurocentrism is related and how past cultural practices of race ranking still dominates our beliefs today.
The definition of ethnocentrism is the evaluations of other cultures according to preconceptions originating in the standards and customs of one's own culture. These preconceptions are often negative in nature.
The ideas of ethnocentrism and Eurocentrism were developed around the 1970s, although aspects of Eurocentrism and ethnocentrism have been present in our society for centuries. This is important to us as it causes major effects on media, beauty standards, Western European ideals toward races, and our education system.
Avery's adjustment to the golden rule is especially important when considering how things have played out in the world. Treat others well if they are the same as you. If they aren't, it's not important because they are not equal to you. This idea is the center hub of how our society has come to treat those considered quote-unquote inferior. The ideas discussed in Lecture 6, and Herbert Spencer in particular had great influence as well. Quote-unquote inferior people will mimic actions to adapt into society because they do not have the intelligence to comprehend it on their own. The idea that race is real, is fact, and is rankable were the ideas leading the mid to late 19th century.
Josiah Clark Knott and George Glydion stated that races could be ranked by and divided according to whether or not they were superior or inferior. The concept of race mixing was thought to deteriorate the white race and diminish Eurocentric values.
Former anthropologists supported race rankings that has left lasting racist ideologies implemented into our society. These anthropologists were considered scientists, therefore were taken very seriously in their false studies. These studies inferiorized races other than the Western European race. Paul Broca is an example of a racist anthropologist that poorly affected our current misconceptions about race. Race rankings based on IQ, cranium size, and shape are erroneous. Eurocentric beauty standards and media projections have perpetuated an unrealistic view for growing adults starting from childhood. Our education system, media, and our market has failed to appreciate and represent a diverse community within our nation. This apparatus can have poor effects on children's self-esteem and also, in effect, forces children to grow up with the Eurocentric ideal of who or what is important or beautiful. Major corporation Disney has been culpable for the underrepresentation of racial minorities in their Disney Princess line. For a while, children could not look up to a culturally correct view of princesses' Black culture and did not have a physical representation of a princess to aspire. While there is an increased amount of diverse sets of additional princesses implemented into Disney's media, misrepresentation of norms in Black culture are still present. For example, the ordinary activity of children playing with dolls has standed as a norm in our community for centuries. Common brand Barbie has been guilty of underrepresenting different ethnicities in their dolls. The first Barbie doll created with the hue of a dark skin tone was not produced until 1980. While this is a huge step to attaining adequate representation, this project was very flawed. Even the darker-skinned Barbie dolls resemble Eurocentric qualities. Feminist activist Latoya Peterson expresses her concerns. Where is my doll? Where is the doll with the afro? Where is the doll with the twists? Where is the doll with the low boy? Where is the doll with the dark brown eyes and the flatter nose and the voluptuous lips? Where is the doll that has all those things, not just some? Where's the doll for little girls that look just like me? Shifting culture may take time, but it also takes the acknowledgement of the socially driven flaws within our society. It is evident that varieties within Eurocentric culture and products are prioritized. Products and advertisements, media, and specifically the beauty industry insufficiently recognize darker skin tones. This accentuates the reality that specifications targeting a Eurocentric group of buyers is hierarchized. Simply constructing a variation of darker skin-colored makeup still hasn't neared equity. A quote from Dr. Iwoma Ukelehi. People of color don't need special skincare. Just like their Caucasian counterparts, people of color also suffer from acne, oily skin, dryness, and even rosacea. There just needs to be a consideration to skin issues that are a particular concern for ethnic women, such as hyperpigmentation. The lack of diversity in including different skin colors for darker skins is apparent as copious amounts of different shades are made for people with lighter skin tones. Racially driven implicit bias is always deemed unfair for a racial minority group. Another example of this includes people who are white adopting Black culture for their own media boost or beauty aesthetic. This exploits marginalized groups for their own profit and commercialization. This exploitation is expressed in many contrasting forms, specifically with people who are white that tan their skin as a fashion statement. Celebrities like Ariana Grande or Kim Kardashian are many growing adults' inspiration. However, they are guilty of adopting Black culture and not experiencing the social detriments based on the color of their skin. These social detriments are transitioning vastly into violent acts perpetuated by racial hate groups and has even been embedded into the justice system. Transitioning into Ruby's topic, atrocities affect a myriad of marginalized racial groups.
As Morgan mentioned, I wanted to show how ethnocentric biases turn into violent acts. A recent article discussed how an Australian man beat up a pregnant woman for being Muslim and wearing a headscarf. After repeatedly punching her, she fell to the ground and he began stomping on her. I decided not to show the contents of this video because it is graphic. She later wrote, "This man verbalized his hatred of Muslims prior to hitting me. He decided that he was going to take it in his power to act upon his hatred, and he neither knows me nor my religion." This is an example of ethnocentrism because it shows how a person of one race uses their preconceptions to judge or harm another because of their background or culture. Another example includes police brutality and their preconceptions of African Americans as violent and aggressive. When cops have this preconception, they're likely to use physical force to hurt or kill people. This story was published by the ACLU. It explains how this woman's experience of police's ethnocentric views. This quote reads, "I was handcuffed, then dragged across the concrete driveway, thrown into the hood of the squad car, and searched. Later, I learned I had a torn labrum in my shoulder and an incapacitated wrist, which required 3 surgeries, steroid injections, and physical therapy. My entire right side was immobilized, and one doctor said that my injuries looked like what football players might have after years of being tackled. Moore had been sitting in her yard with a few friends around, and they were not doing anything wrong." According to What the Data Says About Police Shootings article, the Washington Post began collecting data on fatal shootings in 2015. It found that officers fatally shoot and kill around 1,000 people per year. The total number of people shot by police each year is 3,000. To add on to that, people from minority groups are shot at higher rates. A black man is 2.5 times more likely to be shot than a white man. This goes to show how ethnocentric views still hold. Luckily, Moore was not a fatal statistic, but she is part of the officer's ethnocentric bias. Another racist and ethnocentric encounter happened between a white couple and a black family in Springfield, Oregon last spring. The white couple yelled racist remarks at the black family. This incident just shows how ethnocentric views don't just happen in areas far away from you, but actually still close to home. In an article, What Will It Take for the U.S. to Eradicate Racist Ideas?, a quote reads, "White Americans need to challenge racism, knowing that they will not be free of sexism, class bias, homophobia, and ethnocentrism until black people are free of racism." I think that this is a great suggestion. I think that it shows how African Americans still experience ethnocentrism based on their color, and that they will not fully be equal or free until these racist views are eradicated. Now, I'll briefly introduce a hate group in Portland that have centered ethnocentric views at the forefront of their values. According to the Rolling Stone publication, the Proud Boys are a far-right group. The organization has been classified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center due to its espousal of racist, misogynistic, and Islamophobic ideology. I'll now hand it over to Umeko to further discuss the effect race groups have on our society.
There are roughly 1,020 hate groups within the United States as of 2018. These groups are formed for various reasons, such as political polarization, anti-immigrant sentiment, and losing the power that corresponds to white supremacy. Organizations that revolve around the disdain of a particular group differs between far-right, violent hate groups, and nonviolent ones. These groups are rapidly turning into a deadly threat to the United States. 375 homicide events resulted in the death of 600 people since 1990, and more than half of these incidences were committed by white supremacists. Studies show that far-right terrorists are usually involved in a hate group before they actually become terrorists. In regards to terrorism, the domestic aspect of this issue has not been as thoroughly researched when compared to foreign radicals. Recent social media awareness has drawn attention to 2 groups in particular, the Proud Boys and the Ku Klux Klan. The Proud Boys are known as being a white nationalist and anti-Muslim group. They attend gatherings with other extremist groups such as anti-Semites, Klansmen, militia, and Southern racists. One example being the Unite the Right rally. The group has contributed to hate sites such as vdare.com and American Renaissance in order to spread awareness of their ideologies. Demonstrating their commitment to the cause includes getting a Proud Boys tattoo. Any man can join as long as they believe that white men are not the issue. Members proudly identify as having Islamophobia beliefs. Gavin McInnes, one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, stated, "Muslims have a problem with inbreeding. They tend to marry their first cousins, and that is a major problem here, because when you have mentally damaged inbreds, which are not Muslims, not all Muslims are, but a disproportionate number are." One of the earliest hate groups created in the United States, the Ku Klux Klan, was founded in 1865. Groups quickly began to pop up all over the South, and by 1870, Congress had passed legislation in order to try to deter terrorism. Yet, by this point, the organization had already established its primary goals: to regain power of white supremacy by opposing the Republicans' ideology for equality for African Americans. These Eurocentric ideals became popular in North Carolina during the 1960s as 200 of the 500 groups arose in this state alone. Many white Americans had begun to fear racial competition and used the Ku Klux Klan to defend their economic, political, and social advantages. Although the group is not as prevalent in today's society, its history can be seen all over America. At University of Oregon, Dee Dee was named after a Ku Klux Klan member, and President Scheele wanted to keep the building's title as to not erase history. This is a great example of why we need education in order to learn from the past and change the narrative.
The key point of what I will be discussing is that our school system is taught through a Western lens, and it causes an achievement gap when students of color are seen as inferior to their peers. History has been altered to push the idea that slavery was bad, but it helped set up the success of America and was necessary. In the process of this alteration, many important aspects of Black history have been left out to further this thought process. An example of this is the revolt that started with Andrew Mansion. U.S. officials painted this revolt as an unorganized group of enslaved people, when in reality this revolt came with a lot of education and was meticulously planned. It was also a lot bigger and a more credible threat than it was pointed out as. In Some Myths About Eurocentrism by Adam Edison, he discusses this quote: "What we have learned in this course is that throughout the history of science, scientists have focused on the issues of people of color. Historically, white people have found comfort in being superior to those they want to distance themselves from, and use skewed science as propaganda to solidify these beliefs. An example of this lack of knowledge in our history is the recounts of slavery." In Dear Disgruntled White Plantation Visitors, Michael Twitty brings up how Americans are unaware about the struggle Black people have and currently do face, which is shown in the review of this tweet. Even in our discussion posts, it's a common thing to find students explaining how they never learned about these racist beliefs or actions in their educational career up until now. These are just a few of the discussion posts I have read that contain similar content. The second half of this issue is the way children of color are treated in schools. They come into a system where they are already at a disadvantage because of the color of their skin, which causes a domino effect of setting them up to fail. In this quote, we see how minorities can be punished more harshly than they should be, which helps further the stereotypes that people of color are criminals or cause trouble. Addressing the issues in the school system in terms of what is taught and how kids are treated helps us better identify the solutions that will affect the other material we have discussed. This leads us to our conclusion. Citizens need to be informed on issues regarding racial discrimination and unconscious biases starting at a younger age. In order to achieve this, education and representation is key. Racism is learned. By giving students the full story of our history and giving them a place where they see all students being treated equally, we will be starting the process of removing ignorance. This is the beginning of a solution, but accountability also needs to be expected from prominent places in today's world.
People of color are not accurately being reflected in social media, harming minority groups' self-esteem and furthering Eurocentric beliefs. The exploitation of people of color's culture can be seen everywhere today, typically by the white population, and issues of nonviolent occurrences that minorities face every day are not being properly addressed. Through history, we have witnessed politicians' rhetoric influence and embolden citizens negatively. According to What Will It Take for the U.S. to Eradicate Racist Ideas?, the solution to end racist and Eurocentric/ethnocentric ideologies is to ultimately have an anti-racist in a position of power. Their beliefs will eventually educate societies, and hate groups, much like the Proud Boys and Ku Klux Klan, will be held accountable for their destructive actions.